The message arrived at exactly 10 o'clock on the morning of the 31st of December. I was sitting alone at my kitchen table, warming my hands around a mug of black coffee, while pale winter sunlight slipped through the curtains. Frost covered the windows of my little cottage, slowly disappearing as the morning warmed. Then my phone chimed. It was from my daughter, Lauren. I smiled before opening it. I assumed she was reminding me about the New Year's celebration happening that evening. Instead, I read, "Mom, please don't come to the main house tonight. Caleb's family is coming, and they want a fun, upbeat atmosphere. You'll just make things uncomfortable. Please stay in the cottage. Happy New Year." I read it twice, then a third time. My coffee remained untouched in my hands. I didn't cry. I didn't call her. I didn't send an angry reply. At 65, I had already survived the kind of loss that changes a person forever. My husband, Richard, had died 2 years earlier after 38 years of marriage. Losing him had taught me that grief could arrive quietly, sit beside you at breakfast, and remain there for years. But my daughter's message hurt differently. There was something brutally casual about being told that your own presence could spoil someone's celebration. I placed the phone face down on the table. For years, I had convinced myself that Lauren was simply going through a difficult stage of adulthood. She and her husband, Caleb, were young, ambitious, and trying to establish themselves. I had wanted to help. Maybe I had helped too much. 2 years earlier, after Richard's death, our 4-bedroom house had become unbearably quiet. Every room reminded me of him. At the same time, Lauren and Caleb were struggling with the cost of their downtown apartment. They told me they were desperate to save enough money for a house. So I offered them mine. The arrangement seemed simple. They would move into the main house without paying rent. I would move into the fully furnished cottage in the backyard. They could save aggressively for 2 years, then buy a place of their own. I genuinely believed I was giving my daughter a bridge toward independence. Instead, I had apparently built them a permanent home. Within months, Caleb transformed Richard's old study into an expensive gaming and entertainment room. Lauren began hosting dinner parties almost every weekend. Their friends filled the driveway with luxury cars and the savings they had promised. They never seemed to materialize. Meanwhile, I continued paying the property's electricity, water, internet, security system, and other household expenses. I had even left Lauren as an authorized user on one of my premium credit cards for emergencies. That decision became another mistake. The emergencies quickly became restaurant dinners, designer clothing, grocery deliveries, decorations, and entertainment. Whenever I mentioned the spending, Lauren became defensive. "Mom, we're adults. You don't have to monitor everything we do." Caleb was even worse. He would laugh and tell me I worried too much, so I stopped asking. I told myself that peace was more important than money. But that morning, sitting alone in my cottage after being deliberately excluded from my own home, something inside me finally changed. I opened my laptop. If Lauren wanted me out of her life for one night, I could respect that request. But I was no longer willing to finance the life she was embarrassed to admit depended on me. I logged into my bank account. The credit card statement appeared on the screen. I stared at the recent charges. Nearly $5,000 had been spent in just 3 weeks: luxury catering, premium alcohol, decorations, party rentals, expensive meals. My daughter was preparing an extravagant New Year's celebration while telling her mother to stay hidden in the backyard. Then I noticed something even more interesting. The final catering payment was scheduled for midnight. Lauren had mentioned it earlier in the week. She had casually told me the caterer would charge my card after the celebration ended. She had assumed the card would still work. She was wrong. I closed my eyes for a moment. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to ruin her party. I wasn't going to embarrass her in front of Caleb's family. I simply picked up my phone and made my first call. "Thank you for calling customer service." A cheerful voice answered, "How may I assist you today?" "I need to remove an authorized user from my account," I said. There was a short pause. "Of course. May I have the name?" "Lauren Parker." "And would you like the card permanently deactivated?" I looked toward the window. Beyond the glass stood the house. The home Richard and I had built together. The home I had given to our daughter. The home where she was now preparing a celebration she didn't want me to attend. Yes, I said calmly. Permanently, I ended the call, then I opened another account. This time, I reviewed the utilities. The main house depended on services that were still entirely under my name, including the internet, and Caleb had built his precious smart home system around that connection. I leaned back in my chair. For the first time in 2 years, I wasn't thinking about how to make Lauren happy. I was thinking about what would make me free. Outside, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. A catering truck had arrived. The New Year's party was beginning. And for the first time, I was looking forward to midnight. By noon, the quiet neighborhood had begun to change. A large white catering truck backed into the driveway, followed by 2 smaller vehicles carrying flowers, decorations, glassware, and cases of expensive drinks. From my cottage window, I watched several workers unload everything and carry it into the main house. My house. I almost smiled at the thought. For 2 years, I had trained myself not to think of it that way. I had called it Lauren's home because she lived there. I had told myself that ownership was less important than family. But that morning, her message had reminded me of something important. Family did not mean surrendering every boundary you had. At around 1 o'clock, someone knocked on my cottage door. Before I could answer, it opened. Lauren stepped inside. She was wearing an elegant, cream-colored outfit and holding her phone against one ear. She barely looked at me. "Mom, the catering team needs to use the garage outlet," she said. "And please don't run the dryer or microwave today." I raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "They're bringing in extra refrigerators. We don't want to overload the electrical system." She finally looked at me, then she sighed. "And please don't come into the main house tonight." I wasn't planning to. Good. She checked something on her phone. "Caleb's parents are arriving at 8. They're important people, Mom. There are going to be business connections, investors, executives." She paused. "I just need everything to feel polished." I took a sip of coffee. "Polished, yes, and I don't fit into that." Her expression tightened. "That's not what I said. You said I would ruin the atmosphere." Lauren looked irritated. "Mom, don't make this emotional." I almost laughed. She had insulted me, excluded me, and was now asking me not to become emotional about it. "I won't," I said. Her shoulders relaxed. "Thank you." Then she smiled as though we had just resolved a minor household disagreement. "Oh, one more thing." I waited. "The catering company will charge your card for the final balance at midnight. They already have the authorization." "I see." "Great." She turned toward the door. "Happy New Year, Mom." I looked at her. "Happy New Year, Lauren." She left without noticing anything unusual in my voice. I locked the door, then I returned to my laptop. The credit card was already canceled. Next came the internet. I logged into the service account and opened the network management settings. Caleb had turned the main house into a technological playground. Smart speakers, automated lighting, streaming systems, security devices, wireless televisions. Everything depended on one central connection. I could have disconnected it immediately, but that would have given them time to solve the problem. Instead, I scheduled the network to shut down at exactly 12:01 a.m., 1 minute after midnight. I stared at the confirmation screen. Then I clicked save. That was it. No confrontation, no revenge speech, just consequences. I closed the laptop. For the first time in months, I felt strangely peaceful. Then I remembered something. My sister Monica had been asking me for almost a year to visit her in Florida. Every time she invited me, I had refused. Lauren might need me. Caleb has work. I should stay close to home. There was always another excuse. I picked up my phone and opened a travel app. A direct flight left at 6 o'clock the following morning. I booked it. Then I packed a suitcase, a week of clothes, my medications and toiletries, a book, my passport. I zipped the suitcase and placed it beside the door. The weight in my chest seemed to disappear. By 8 that evening, the neighborhood looked completely different. Luxury SUVs lined the street. Valets stood near the driveway. Guests arrived wearing glittering dresses, tailored suits, and expensive coats. Music poured from the main house. I stayed inside my cottage, Through the window, I saw Lauren greeting everyone with a champagne glass in her hand. She looked radiant, confident, successful. Exactly the image she wanted everyone to believe. Then Caleb's parents arrived. His mother stepped out of a black SUV, wearing a long designer coat. She looked toward the cottage. She said something to Caleb. He glanced at my window and laughed. I couldn't hear what they said. But I didn't need to. For years, I had been the invisible woman behind their comfortable lifestyle. Tonight, I was finally invisible by choice. I made myself dinner, chicken soup, toasted bread, and a cup of herbal tea. While music shook the walls of the main house, I sat quietly with a book. 9 o'clock, then 10, then 11. The celebration became louder. I checked the clock. 11:45. Through the window, I could see nearly 50 guests gathering around the enormous television in the living room. The countdown was approaching. I opened my laptop one final time. The network shutdown was still scheduled. 12:01 a.m. I closed the computer. Then I walked to the window with my tea. Inside the main house, Lauren was laughing beside Caleb and his parents. A caterer approached her carrying a payment terminal. Lauren reached into her designer purse. I knew exactly what she was holding, my silver credit card. She handed it over confidently. The caterer walked away to process the final bill. Lauren didn't know yet, but in less than 15 minutes, she was going to discover that the woman she had tried to hide was no longer willing to pay for the life she was pretending to own. I looked at the clock. 11:58. 3 minutes. I took another sip of tea and waited. At 11:59 p.m., I could hear the guests counting down from inside the main house. 10. The voices grew louder. 9. I stood beside my window holding my tea. 8. Inside the house, champagne glasses were raised. 7. Lauren stood beside Caleb, smiling for everyone around her. 6. Caleb's parents stood nearby, surrounded by their friends. 5. I glanced at my laptop. The network shutdown was ready. 4. The caterer was still holding my deactivated credit card. 3. Lauren lifted her glass. 2. I took a slow breath. 1. The house erupted. Happy New Year! Confetti exploded through the living room. People hugged. Couples kissed. Champagne spilled. Music blasted from the speakers. And then the clock changed. 12:01. Everything stopped. The television went black. The music disappeared. The wireless speakers went silent. The colorful smart lights suddenly reset, flooding the entire room with harsh white light. The effect was almost comical. 1 second, the guests were celebrating in a glamorous party. The next, they were standing beneath bright overhead lights surrounded by half-empty glasses, dirty plates, and confused expressions. People looked at their phones. What's happening? Did the power go out? Is the internet down? Caleb immediately pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen repeatedly. Then he walked toward the router. I watched from my window. He checked the cables. He restarted the equipment. Nothing worked. The network was gone. Then I noticed the caterer. He was standing beside Lauren. His expression had changed completely. There was no longer a professional smile on his face. He held up the payment terminal. Lauren looked at the screen. Her smile disappeared. She tried the card again. The machine rejected it. She frowned. Try it again. The caterer did. Declined. Lauren looked embarrassed. There's probably a problem with the machine. She handed him another card. He processed it. Declined again. Caleb walked over. What is it? The caterer quietly explained. The final balance was over $3,000, and he needed payment immediately. Lauren looked toward Caleb. Use your card. Caleb's expression hardened. I can't. What do you mean you can't? My limit is maxed. Her face went pale. What about your father's card? You know I don't have access to it. The conversation was becoming louder. Several guests were beginning to notice. One couple quietly put on their coats. Another guest whispered something to a friend. Lauren looked around desperately. Her carefully constructed image was falling apart in front of everyone. Then, Caleb's mother stepped forward. What happened? Nobody answered immediately. The caterer finally explained that the payment method provided earlier had been declined and the remaining balance needed to be settled. His mother looked at Lauren. Wasn't everything already paid? Lauren swallowed. The final amount was supposed to go through automatically. Through whose card? Lauren hesitated. That hesitation told the woman everything. Whose card? Lauren? My mother's. Silence. Caleb's mother slowly looked toward the backyard cottage. I imagined her remembering the small building she had glanced at earlier. The mother who had supposedly been too unpleasant to attend their celebration was apparently the person financing it. Meanwhile, Caleb was still fighting with the internet. He restarted the router again. Nothing. He looked furious. Who controls this account? Lauren didn't answer. He turned toward her. Lauren, she whispered something. What? My mother. Caleb stared at her. What? The internet account is in Mom's name. His face changed. He finally understood. I had not ruined their party. I had simply stopped paying for it. My phone began vibrating 12:05 a.m. Lauren. I let it ring. Then it stopped. A few seconds later, it rang again. I answered. Mom! Her voice was barely controlled. What happened? I remained silent. The internet is gone. The television won't work. The speakers are dead. The caterer says the payment didn't go through. Still, I said nothing. Mom, please. I could hear chaos behind her. People talking, someone arguing, a door closing, Caleb shouting. Lauren lowered her voice. Did you do something? I looked at the suitcase beside my door. Yes. There was silence. You canceled my card? Yes. Why would you do that? I almost smiled. Because it's my card. Mom, you can't do this tonight. I can, but we have guests. I know, Caleb's parents are here. I know, the caterer needs $3,000. I know. Her breathing became faster. Please turn the internet back on. I looked through my window at the main house. The party was over, not because of me. Because the people inside had built their celebration on resources they had never earned. I was told not to come over tonight, I said quietly. Mom, you said I would ruin the atmosphere. I didn't mean it like that. You told me to stay in the cottage. I was upset. You told me your guests wanted a fun, upbeat environment. Please, and now you're asking me to rescue the party, she began crying. Mom, please, everyone is watching. I closed my eyes. For 2 years, I had confused being needed with being loved. Tonight, I finally understood the difference. You wanted me out of the picture, I said. So I'm staying out. Mom, I ended the call. Then I switched my phone off. The cottage became completely quiet. For a moment, I stood there listening to the distant sounds from the main house. Then even those sounds began fading. The guests were leaving. The party was finished. I picked up my suitcase. Tomorrow morning, I was leaving for Florida. And when I came back, nothing about our arrangement was going to remain the same. I slept better that night than I had in years. There was no guilt, no second guessing, no wondering whether I had been too harsh. For the first time since Richard died, I felt as though I had finally made a decision for myself instead of making another decision for Lauren. At 4:30 in the morning, I woke before the alarm. The cottage was silent. I showered, dressed, and carried my suitcase outside. The main house was dark. The driveway, which had been crowded with luxury vehicles only hours earlier, was nearly empty. A few abandoned decorations moved in the cold morning breeze. I looked at the house for a long moment. That place held nearly 4 decades of memories. Richard and I had raised Lauren there. We had celebrated birthdays, holidays, graduations, and ordinary Sunday dinners. I had never imagined that one day I would feel like a guest on my own property. But that chapter was over. I locked the cottage and drove toward the airport. I didn't leave a note. I didn't send Lauren a message. I simply left. During the flight to Florida, I turned my phone on briefly. The notifications appeared immediately. 23 missed calls, 31 messages. Most were from Lauren. A few were from Caleb. I didn't read them. I turned the phone off again. When I arrived, my sister Monica was waiting outside the terminal. The moment she saw my suitcase, she smiled. You finally came. I laughed. I finally did. She hugged me tightly. For the next 3 weeks, I did something I had almost forgotten how to do. I relaxed. Monica took me to the beach. We went shopping. We sat outside restaurants for hours talking about nothing important. One afternoon, we drove along the coast with the windows down and music playing. I realized how much of my life I had spent waiting for Lauren to need me. Every decision had revolved around her schedule, her problems, her finances, her marriage, her comfort, I had called that love, maybe some of it was love, but some of it was fear. I had been terrified that if I stopped giving, Lauren would stop loving me. Florida taught me something simple. If someone's affection disappears the moment you stop paying for their lifestyle, that affection was never what you thought it was. 3 weeks later, I finally turned my phone back on. The messages came flooding in. Lauren had written that she was sorry, then she blamed Caleb, then she blamed the stress, then she said I had humiliated her, then she apologized again. Caleb's messages were less emotional. He wanted to discuss financial arrangements. I smiled at that phrase, financial arrangements, as though we were business partners. I returned home at the end of January. The moment I drove through the gate, I noticed how different everything looked. The decorations were gone. The driveway was empty, the main house was quiet. I walked through the front door. Lauren and Caleb were sitting in the living room. They looked exhausted. Lauren stood immediately. "Mom." I set my suitcase down. "Hello." She approached me. "I want to explain." "You can." She took a breath. "That night got completely out of control. I know. We didn't expect the card to stop working. I know." Caleb's parents were furious. I imagine they were. She lowered her eyes. "We had to borrow money." I nodded. Then I walked toward the coffee table. I had already prepared everything before returning home. I placed 2 envelopes in front of them. Lauren looked confused. "What's this?" The first envelope contained utility transfer documents. She opened it. Her eyes moved across the pages. "Mom, everything connected to the house is being transferred out of my name." She stared at me. "The electricity, water, internet, security system, and other services. But you'll need to establish your own accounts. We can't do that immediately. Then you'll need to figure out another arrangement." Caleb finally spoke. "You can't just cut everything off." I looked at him. "I'm not cutting anything off. I'm transferring responsibility to the people using the services." He said nothing. Lauren opened the second envelope. Her face changed. "What is this?" "A lease." She looked at me in disbelief. "A lease? Yes. For this house?" I nodded. "Market rate rent, month to month." Lauren stared at me. "Mom, you said we could stay here." "I said you could stay here while you saved for your own home. We were planning to. For 2 years?" She had no answer. I continued calmly. "You've had enough time, but we can't afford market rent. Then you may need to find somewhere you can afford." Lauren's eyes filled with tears. "You're really doing this?" I looked at my daughter. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. "Yes." She shook her head. "I can't believe you're treating your own daughter like a tenant." I gave her a quiet answer. "You're the one who taught me I shouldn't expect a place in your home." The room became completely silent. Neither of them argued after that. They finally understood. The woman they had considered a permanent source of money had stopped asking for permission to have boundaries. I had spent 2 years giving them everything. Now, I was asking for something very simple: responsibility. And this time, I wasn't going to apologize for it. The next few weeks were uncomfortable. Lauren tried every approach she could think of. First came apologies, then explanations, then accusations, finally, silence. I remained calm through all of it. I didn't argue with her. I didn't remind her of every sacrifice I had made. I didn't bring up the money I had spent over the previous 2 years. I didn't need to. The documents on the coffee table said enough. For the first time, Lauren and Caleb had to look at their lifestyle honestly. The house had never been theirs. The utilities had never been theirs. The credit card had never been theirs. Even the internet they depended on had been paid for by someone they had treated as an inconvenience. The truth was uncomfortable, but it was simple. They had confused generosity with obligation. I had helped them because I loved them. They had accepted that help because it benefited them. Somewhere along the way, the difference between those two things had disappeared. A week after I returned, Lauren approached me in the kitchen. "Mom, can we talk?" I nodded. She sat across from me. "I know I hurt you." I remained quiet. I shouldn't have sent that message. "No," I agreed. She looked down. I was worried about what Caleb's parents would think. "Why?" She hesitated. "Because they think we're doing better financially than we actually are." There it was, the truth. I leaned back. So you were trying to impress them? Yes, with money you didn't have. She nodded. And a house that wasn't yours. Her eyes filled with tears. I know. I didn't say anything. Lauren wiped her face. I thought if they saw how successful we looked, Caleb's father might help him with his business. Maybe. She looked at me. Do you hate me? That question hurt more than anything she had said before. No. Then why are you doing this? Because loving you doesn't mean allowing you to use me. She looked away. For a moment, she seemed like the little girl I remembered. The child who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, the teenager who called me from school when she had her first broken heart. The young woman whose wedding dress I had helped choose. I loved that daughter. I still loved the woman sitting across from me, but love didn't require me to destroy myself for her. I need you to learn how to stand on your own, I said. She whispered. I don't know if I can. You will. That was the last serious conversation we had before they moved out. Over the next 2 months, they began searching for another place. Their spending changed dramatically. The designer deliveries stopped. The restaurant charges disappeared. The expensive weekend trips ended. Caleb sold some of his gaming equipment. Lauren sold several pieces of clothing she had barely worn. They rented a modest apartment across town. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't large, but it was theirs. 2 months after our conversation, they moved out. I watched from the front porch as the final boxes were loaded into a rented truck. Lauren came toward me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she hugged me. I hugged her back. I'm sorry, Mom. I know. I really am. I know. She pulled away. Can I come visit you? I smiled. Of course. She looked surprised. Even after everything, you're my daughter. Her eyes filled with tears. But things are different now. Yes, I said. They are. She nodded. I think different might be better. After they left, I stood alone in the driveway. The house was quiet again. But this time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful. I walked through every room. The living room where Richard and I had spent countless evenings. The kitchen where Lauren had grown up. The study where Caleb had installed his gaming equipment. I opened the windows and let fresh air move through the rooms. Then I changed the locks. I transferred every account into my own name. I canceled services I didn't need. I removed the smart home equipment they had installed. Little by little, I reclaimed the house, not because I wanted to punish Lauren, because I finally understood that reclaiming my home also meant reclaiming myself. That evening, I sat on the back porch with a cup of tea, the same place where I had once watched strangers arrive for a party I wasn't welcome to attend. I looked toward the cottage. For 2 years, I had lived there believing I was making a sacrifice for my daughter. Now I understood that sacrifice without limits doesn't create gratitude. It creates expectation. And expectation, when never challenged, becomes entitlement. I didn't regret helping Lauren. I regretted forgetting myself while doing it. My phone buzzed. A message from Lauren. Mom, thank you for giving us a chance to learn. I read it twice. Then I smiled. I typed back. I didn't give you a chance. You gave yourselves one. I'm just finally letting you live your own life. I set the phone down. The evening sky turned gold over the backyard. For the first time in years, the house belonged to me again. But more importantly, my life did too. Several months passed after Lauren and Caleb moved out. Life became wonderfully ordinary. There were no unexpected deliveries. No friends filling the driveway. No requests for my credit card. No messages asking me to pay a bill because they were a little short this month. I had forgotten how peaceful ordinary life could be. I repainted the living room. I turned Richard's old study back into a quiet library. I planted roses along the walkway he had built himself years ago. And, slowly, the house stopped feeling like a monument to everything I had lost. It became my home again. Lauren and I also began rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't immediate. Trust doesn't return simply because someone says they're sorry. We started with small things. Coffee together, short phone calls, Sunday lunches. Sometimes we talked about what happened. Sometimes we didn't. But one thing was different. Lauren no longer treated my help as something she was automatically entitled to. When she needed advice, she asked. When she needed money, she didn't assume the answer would be yes. And when I said no, she accepted it. That mattered more than any apology. About a year after the New Year's Eve that changed everything, Lauren came to visit me. She stood in the kitchen holding a small gift bag. "I brought you something." I smiled. "You didn't have to. I know." She handed me the bag. Inside was a framed photograph of Richard and me from our wedding anniversary. I stared at it for a long moment. "I found this in an old box," Lauren said. "I thought you might like it." I ran my fingers along the frame. "Thank you," she smiled. Then she looked around the kitchen. "You've really changed this place. It feels different." "It is," she nodded. Then she said something I never expected. "I'm glad you stopped rescuing me." I looked at her. She laughed softly. "That sounds strange, doesn't it?" "A little, but I mean it." She sat at the table. "When you paid for everything, I thought you were helping me become successful." She paused. "Actually, you were making it easier for me not to grow up." I didn't interrupt. I didn't realize how dependent we'd become until everything stopped. She looked down. "That night was humiliating, I know, but it needed to happen." I smiled gently. "Maybe." She looked at me. "Do you still regret canceling the card?" "No," she laughed. "Good." We sat together in comfortable silence. Then Lauren asked, "Are you happy now?" I looked around the kitchen, at the photograph on the wall, at the flowers blooming outside, at the sunlight across the wooden floor. Yes, the answer came easily. "I am." She reached across the table and held my hand. "I'm happy for you." That evening, after she left, I walked outside and sat on the back porch. The cottage stood quietly behind me. The main house stood in front of me. For years, I had thought the most painful part of losing Richard was losing the person who had shared my life. But eventually I realized there had been another loss. I had lost myself while trying to keep everyone else comfortable. I had mistaken silence for peace. I had mistaken financial support for love, and I had mistaken being needed for being valued. That New Year's Eve changed all of that. I didn't destroy my daughter's life. I didn't abandon her. I simply stopped carrying a responsibility that had never belonged to me. Sometimes people call boundaries cruel because they benefited from you having none. Sometimes saying no feels like betrayal because you've spent years saying yes. And sometimes the strongest thing a parent can do for an adult child is step aside and let them experience the consequences of their own choices. I looked at the sky. The sun was beginning to set. I thought about that message Lauren had sent me so casually the previous New Year's Eve. "Please stay in the cottage." At the time, I thought those words were an insult. Now I saw them differently. They had been an unexpected gift. Because that message forced me to stop pretending everything was fine. It forced me to look at my life honestly. And it gave me the courage to take it back. I raised my cup of tea and smiled. The following New Year's Eve, Lauren invited me to her apartment. No expensive caterers, no luxury cars, no fake image of wealth. Just dinner with family. She had cooked everything herself. When midnight approached, she handed me a glass of sparkling cider. "Ready?" I laughed. "Very." The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. We looked at each other. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. "Happy New Year, Mom." "Happy New Year, Lauren." She hugged me. And this time, I wasn't standing outside someone's celebration, watching through a window. I was exactly where I belonged, at home, with my daughter. But most importantly, I had finally learned that coming home wasn't about reclaiming a house. It was about reclaiming myself.